Good evening, and welcome back. The fire is stoked, the tea is poured, and the shadows are falling deep tonight. So come, drift with me again, up onto the asphalt highways and byways of Southern California, and down into a darkness where neon signs flickered above lonely bars, where young men lingered with their hopes and hungers, and where one quiet-eyed man cruised among them, carrying a hunger all his own. Patrick Wayne Kearney was not the kind of monster who raged in crowded rooms. No. He moved with a calm silence, with arithmetic and calculation. Act 1 was always the same. A neat little pistol, small enough to be hidden, final enough to leave no chance. By day, he was an engineer, his hands steady enough to design aircraft. But by night, those same hands became tools of desecration, steady enough to dismantle the very bodies of those who trusted his smile, his nod, and his lie. 28 times, in fact, maybe more. A boy steps into his car. The road hums beneath the tires. The promise of safety lasts for only minutes. Then, the noise from nowhere, the silence filling everywhere, and then, the ritual. The very reason he came, the hunger he needed to fill. Necrophilia, dismemberment, and the plastic shrouds that gave him his name. The trash bag killer. Born in 1939, the youngest of 3 boys, Patrick Wayne Kearney grew up frail, sickly, and alone. A thin child in a rough world, he became a target, bullied, ridiculed, made small by the hands and words of others. But in the corners of his mind, new shapes began to form. Daydreams of revenge, fantasies of death, not yet action, but seeds planted in very dark soil. By his teens, he had withdrawn from the world, quiet and brooding. Those who knew him then remember a boy who rarely smiled, a boy who preferred isolation to company. Yet inside that isolation, something was taking shape. An arithmetic of cruelty he would one day bring to life. He married briefly, tried to live inside the lines of an ordinary life, but the union collapsed almost as soon as it began. California beckoned. Hughes Aircraft offered a steady paycheck. The young man, who had once been a bullied boy, became an engineer, competent, polite, and still invisible. But the long drives home from work became something else. He had a partner now, David Hill, a relationship riddled with arguments. To escape the tension, Patrick would climb behind the wheel and drift through Southern California's endless grid of highways. Neon signs flickering above bars, lonely men by the roadside, hitchhikers with nowhere else to go. And somewhere, on those drives, the arithmetic in his mind turned into action, a pistol, a body, and a ritual of death. The year was the mid-1960s, though Patrick himself would later blur the dates. He spoke of a hitchhiker, young, nameless, picked up on one of those long, restless drives. There was no argument, no struggle, no prolonged torture. Only the pistol, a single precise shot. That was Act 1. Act 2 belonged to Patrick alone. With death came possession, and with possession came the hunger he had carried for years. He defiled the corpse, finding in its silence the control he had never known in life. When the compulsion was spent, he turned to calculation. Dismemberment, done cleanly, done quietly, with the care of a craftsman. And then, the bags. Thick, black, plastic. Each piece wrapped and sealed, the human form reduced to refuse. Along the freeways, in ravines, out where the desert swallowed everything, Patrick scattered his secrets. 1 bag, 2, 20, arithmetic. It was a ritual of numbers and neatness. A formula that made him invisible for more than a decade. For while the neon lights flickered above California's gay bars, while hitchhikers climbed into strangers' cars, Patrick Kearney was out there too, cruising, waiting, carrying his neat little pistol and his unholy appetite. And with every victim, the pattern grew sharper, the name inevitable, the trash bag killer. The case the newspapers called the trash bag murders began on April 13th, 1975, when the mutilated remains of 21-year-old Albert Rivera were found near San Juan Capistrano. It would not be the last. By November of that year, 6 more bodies had surfaced across Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, and San Diego counties. Each bore the same cold signature: nude, shot in the head, sometimes dismembered, always trussed in the black plastic bags that gave the case its name. Detectives began to see the pattern forming. By March 1977, the toll had climbed to 8. And though the victims were strangers to each other, they shared common threads: young, vulnerable, most tied to the gay community, each discarded like refuse at the side of California's endless roads. Then came the boy who broke the silence. 17-year-old John LeMay left home on March 13, telling his parents he was going to visit someone he called Dave. He never returned. 5 days later, his dismembered remains were found south of Corona, scattered in the dust of a highway shoulder. Friends told police that Dave was David Hill. The address led not only to Hill, but to his quiet-eyed roommate, Patrick Kearney. Warrants were issued, posters went up, the manhunt was on. But when the curtain fell, there was no chase, no last stand, no shot fired in the dark. On July 1st, 1977, Patrick Kearney and David Hill walked into the Riverside County Sheriff's Office, pointed to their own faces on the wall, and smiled. "That's us," they said. And so it was. In the quiet room that followed, Patrick unfolded horrors like a ledger. He spoke of more than 24 murders, each one described with clinical precision. He told them how he lured the young men, how he killed them, how he cut them apart. He drew maps with the same steady hands that once designed aircraft, marking dump sites across the deserts and ravines of Southern California. His words gave detectives what they needed: answers for families long left in silence, names for the nameless dead. But it also gave the world something colder, a glimpse into the arithmetic of his mind. He was calm, polite, detailed, and utterly without remorse. The man who had reduced his victims to black bags of anonymity had finally named himself Patrick Wayne Kearney, the trash bag killer. There would be no circus, no drawn-out trial filled with gruesome evidence and battling lawyers. Patrick Kearney had already spoken. His confessions were meticulous, his guilt undeniable, and his survival instinct clear. By pleading guilty, he could avoid California's gas chamber. So in 1977, inside the superior courts of Los Angeles, Riverside, and Orange counties, Kearney stood and quietly admitted to 21 murders. Each plea was calm, deliberate, spoken without hesitation. He spared the state the effort of proving what he had already laid bare, but in doing so, he also secured his own life. The sentence was final and heavy: 21 consecutive life terms, without the possibility of parole. A chain of life sentences stacked so high that even if one link broke, 20 more would remain. Patrick Kearney would never breathe free air again. Those who watched him in court expected to see a monster unmasked. Instead, they saw something more unnerving: a mild, soft-spoken man who addressed the judge politely, who never once raised his voice, who looked like any neighbor, any stranger you might pass on the street. And yet, this unremarkable figure was responsible for scattering bodies across California's highways for more than a decade. It was this contrast, the quiet exterior, the monstrous reality, that unsettled everyone who heard him speak. For Patrick Kearney was not a storm that announced itself. He was the silence after the shot, the black bag by the roadside, the phantom arithmetic of death. And so, Patrick Wayne Kearney sits behind prison walls, an old man now, his quiet hands folded, his weapon long gone, his eyes dulled by the years. But the bags he left along the highways of Southern California have never been gathered away. They remain in memory, in grief, in the echoes of families who still ache for answers that never came. And likewise, as a pleasant muse, in the mind of the old man who knew better than most, there was a truth when it came to the highways of Southern California in the years of their youth. Wickedness did, and make no mistake, most assuredly still does, ran down both sides of the neon-lit alleys in those days and clung like wet fog on the whispering wind, always in the darkness down the road. But mind ye not this truth, 'twas death to the dancer, either way.
Thanks for listening. This has been Fireside Crime Stories, where the darkest tales are always read by firelight. If you haven't already, subscribe, and before you drift off, toss a little fuel on the fire. Hit that like button, ring that bell, so when the shadows shift again, you'll be the first to know that another fire's burning and another story's being told. Until next time, rest well.